And the fact that they conference the case, that does not ever waive your right to trial. You have the opportunity to conference if you want to, then you go to trial. And let me just say that when you come into court, the protocol applies trial or conference or arraignment. You come into court, whether you're a civilian, you're appearing as a lay person or as an attorney. Village courts sit at night, as I said, and everybody's tired. It's been a long day, but you still need to come in dressed and acting appropriately because you are still coming into court and you're still appearing before a judge. And you need to act that way, not just to the judge, but to the other people that are sitting there with you before the court.
So it's good to be respectful and patient, and the court may have a long docket, so just relax and bring some reading material and see what goes on and how other cases are handled.
Yes, exactly. And the best thing to do is to pay attention and be honest. And if you don't understand something that the judge said, and they're doing your case, ask them. Ask the question.
And also, if you feel it's getting too much and you want to consult with an attorney or have an attorney represent you, ask for an adjournment.
Correct. You can, and all of your trial rights are, and many people that appear in front of me for trial, as you asked, don't have attorneys. But that doesn't mean they don't have their trial rights. And I tell them before they even get their trial date that they had the burdens on the prosecution, that the prosecution has to present the witnesses, and that the defendant doesn't have to do anything. They can ask questions if they want. They can testify if they like as to what they say happened. They could put in their own exhibits, but they don't have to. The burden is always on the prosecution, and they don't need a lawyer to do that, but they can certainly bring one in if they wish.
And they could bring a friend or relative for moral support, but that person cannot speak for them.
Correct.
But if they want to have an attorney represent them, they might be able to, and they don't want to be involved themselves, they might be able to give an appropriate letter to the attorney to act for them?
Yes, that's correct. Also, let me just mention, talking about help when you come into court, I often have people come in who English is not their first language, or they do not speak enough English to understand the proceedings. And recently I had somebody bring their 12-year-old niece. Somebody brought their 9-year-old son. That's okay just for me to ascertain that the person can't understand English, and I can ensure that they'll understand their rights, and then I make arrangements to get them an interpreter, an authorized interpreter.
So someone to give a general explanation, that's okay, but for official court proceeding, whether it's a plea or a trial, you will arrange for an interpreter at no cost to them. Yes,
and if it's an arraignment, I'll enter the not guilty plea for them, and then I will mark the papers. They need to be rearranged when the interpreter is there on the next date.
And if all does not go well for the person in the village court, what rights of appeal do they have?
You can appeal a conviction from the village court to the appellate in Nassau County to the appellate term.
And that probably would be more complicated. They may need an attorney for that. They might need to buy a transcript of the recordings that went on?
Yes. Actually, based on the current state of the law, I believe that the village courts have stenographers, live stenographers for trials. And yes, somebody would have to purchase that transcript. The process itself, I'm told, is not so difficult that a lay person couldn't do it themselves. The clerks in all the courts are very helpful in terms of helping the person obtain or learn how to get that transcript.
Who might have enough at stake to consider, having an attorney involved?
Well, anybody who is in any precarious situation where what happens in village court might jeopardize something valuable to them, like a driver's license, or where they have such a serious, a terribly bad or reckless driving record, and then they get, say, a 5-point speed, and they're at risk of losing their license or going to jail. That's somebody who might want to have an attorney during the trial.
And especially if they have a commercial license and need that license to continue working.
Yes.
Or someone has, say, real estate, and could be a potentially big fine or problems down the road. They may want to invest in an attorney.
Yes, and also somebody who, on principle, just believes that the prosecution is wrong may, for that reason, want to get their own attorney, and they often do. And other times, that's why they don't want an attorney. They want to handle it themselves, as a matter of principle.
And if, again, only a small amount is at stake, or that they have let's say, a clean license, they might, have little to risk by just representing themselves.
Well, that's not something I want to give an opinion on, but it's certainly something they have an opportunity to consider after they've, at the very least, been arraigned, know what the possibilities are, and maybe even had a conference. They haven't waived any trial rights at that point.
And some people may be part of some kind of legal plan that provides an attorney at a low expense or perhaps no expense for exactly this type of situation.
Correct.
And what tips do you have for attorneys appearing in the village courts?
The same as I would tell a layperson. Everybody who's coming is coming at night. Everybody, including the judge, is tired from working all day. And you need to, and that's acknowledged, but you need to be polite, respectful. It's still a court. And the one thing I will say is we can take attorneys first just because they're attorneys. If you have a packed courtroom, like my courtrooms work, first come, first serve. And my big exception is somebody who's sitting there who I can see is exhausted and was clearly up since probably 5 a.m. or has 2 screaming children with them. I'm going to take them first for the benefit of all of us so that we can all hear what's going on and I can take care of them and get them out of there so that the proceedings can be in better order. Other than that, the tips are the same. Be polite, follow instructions. If you're told to sign in, if you want a conference, go and make sure you sign in. If you don't, you'll end up sitting there till everything's done and we look at you and say, what are you doing here? And we find out it's for a conference, but you hadn't signed in for one even though you had been told to do so.
And does a person need to bring any kind of documentation or paperwork when they're coming, let's say, for a driving offense or for, let's say, some kind of real estate issue?
Well, if you come for if it's for a driving offense, for example, say it's for no license or an expired registration, no insurance, there is a thing called dismiss on production. If it turns out that you got a ticket for no insurance because you couldn't produce proof of it that night or no registration or something like that, and it's just because you didn't have it on you. You did fail to produce it, but you were licensed. You did have insurance or it was registered. And if you bring that proof, you may very well get the charges dismissed on production. So if it's that kind of a charge, yes, or operating a business without a particular license, yes, you should bring that documentation with you, especially no insurance. Most of the courts, because I believe it's a statewide form, have a form it's a letter that gets filled out by your insurance company verifying that you had insurance on the date in question, and then you could most likely get a dismissal on production. And if it's a charge of not having insurance, as opposed to failing to produce proof of, say, a driver's license, it will be dismissed.
And does that work with equipment violations, too, if you show a repair receipt? If you
show, I believe it's within 24 hours, and you show proof that the brake light was repaired within that time period, you can also get a dismissal on production.
And again, if a person received a number of tickets at the same time, depending on their discussions with the village prosecutor, they might be able to work out
a plea bargain, a disposition. It's not a dirty word, Kenny.
Okay. And what the disposition is might depend on the guidelines for that court and that prosecutor. There's no uniform standard among villages. No,
and I have to tell you, as a former county prosecutor, and I work in the courts for my day job, there is no standard anything. Every case has to be looked at for itself and what the facts are, what the defendant's background is. If you're talking about driving, a driving record, you're talking about a ordinance type violation. Is it a restaurant that's been doing this constantly? And yes, all those factors are considered. There's no standard policy.
And let's just turn to the Nassau County Magistrates Association, and you're the president of it. What kind of programs are you and goals do you have for the association?
My biggest goal as president is to increase the communication between our members, among our members, and especially electronically through a website that we're setting up. We should be going live very shortly because the mission of the Nassau County Magistrates Association, one of the purposes is to ensure the continuing education, legal education of the village judges and to keep them informed with respect to not only the law but procedure and decor, to ensure that our courts are the best they can be and that everyone has a fair shake and a fair opportunity and that the judges are kept apprised of the law. And We also, through the Office of Court Administration, which offers village judges a tremendous amount of legal resources, we also have mandatory continuing judicial education, and that's sponsored from the Office of Court Administration through our association to our members. In addition to that, we run various events, and I've added some this year to give the judges an opportunity in a less formal setting to ask each other, the newer judges and the veteran judges, and ask that question you're afraid to ask, or bring up issues that are common among us but nobody knows because nobody wants to bring it up, and how to deal with them, and to share the knowledge and information.
And we just have a moment or two left, but these courtrooms and these proceedings are open to the public. Someone
Yes.
can go observe in advance of their appearance to see what goes on.
Yes.
And also, if it comes down to the trial, as you said, the burden of proof is on the prosecutor, so the police officer who observed the violation probably would testify, and then the defendant or their attorney have the right to cross-examine that witness.
Or not.
Or
they
not.
can choose not to, and the defendant has the right to testify or not. If they testify, they can be cross-examined. And they also have the right to bring in their own witnesses or exhibits. Often I do trials, people bring in photographs of the sign and what they say it didn't say.
Or the area.
Yes.
If they're disputing it or feel that's
Yes.
helpful to their defense.
But they don't have to. The burden is on the prosecution.
Okay, and just in 30 seconds, what are the final tips do you have for the public or for attorneys concerning the village courts and magistrates?
I guess just be respectful to the judges and to each other. Listen, follow instructions. And I guess the most important thing from the beginning to the end through the conference is be honest. It'll get you a lot further than being dishonest or incredible, say, when you're conferencing with a prosecutor or offering an explanation as to sentence, to be considered for sentencing with the judge.
And you can try to represent yourself, but if you feel it's too complicated or too much involved, you can ask for an adjournment and get an attorney.
Absolutely.
I would like to thank our guest, Susan Katz Richman, for talking to us about the Nassau County Magistrates Association and the Village Courts of Nassau County. Keep in mind, whatever you've heard is presented as information only. You should get your own legal advice from your own attorney once they're apprised of your personal situation. Please join us next week at the same time for another program on Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC or over the internet at ncc.edu/WHPC.